Welcome to She Counts, the Real Talk podcast for women in accounting. We're your hosts, Nancy McClelland
and Questian Telka.
And every episode, we're digging into the real experiences, challenges, and unspoken truths of life in this profession.
Because if you've ever felt like you're the only one, you're not. And you shouldn't have to figure it out alone.
Special thanks to our Season 3 sponsors, Bill, Relay, and Carbon. We are so grateful to them for helping us bring these conversations to life, enabling us to share out loud what everyone's thinking, but no one's saying. Learn more about them on our sponsors page at shecounts.show.
And if you really want to support the podcast, the one thing that would make the biggest impact is to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Reviews really do help other women find our podcast.
Remember, you can go to earmark.app to earn CPE credit, and please follow the She Counts podcast on LinkedIn to join in the conversation.
Nancy and I recently returned from one of our favorite conferences, and all of you know, if you've listened in before, how much we love conferences. So we were at Scaling New Heights, and today we're sharing some of the lessons about leadership that we discussed on stage as speakers.
Now, we led two really different presentations, and then Questian and I were talking with each other afterwards about it and our takeaways and how, the presentations went. And we realized how much our presentations had in common that on the surface, we hadn't noticed initially.
And as you all know, we love launching every episode with a story. Nancy has one about the origin of her panel on vulnerability as a strength.
Yeah, so my panel was all about vulnerability in empathetic leadership, how we can become better leaders by becoming more honest and open about our struggles. And Questions is all about change management with clients, which is all about a different kind of leadership where you're looking outwards at other people. So mine, it was this idea that I had years ago at a conference. I was talking with Anna Dinia, who I met through Bookkeeping Buds. So she's been a conference buddy of mine for many, many, many years. And we were talking about how much less alone we would feel if we knew that what we see on social media isn't the whole story. And I don't mean to insinuate that people are necessarily like hiding the hard things so that we think they're more successful than they are.
Well, people, they hide the hard things because it's hard to be vulnerable, like you said,
Yeah,
right? And
exactly.
it's
Well,
scary.
I mean, we tend to celebrate the good stuff, right? Like if you and I, even if it's not on social media, like I'll text you and I'll be like, "Yay, this amazing thing happened." I'm not usually, unless I like really need you, I'm not like, "Oh my God, this horrible thing happened," or "I had a poopy day," right? Like we tend to share successes. We tend to celebrate the good stuff, and we deal with the hard things in solitude. There was a WhatsApp in Theater of Public Speaking in one of our groups in there, and a woman hadn't been there for a while, and she showed up suddenly, and she was like, "Look, I've really been struggling for a long time, and now I'm coming out the other side, and I'm sorry that I disappeared for a while, but I'm okay now, and here's what happened." And she tells us the story kind of, after the fact. That's really common. She was like, it was just too hard to reach out while I was in the messy middle, right? So Anna and I were talking about this with Alnisha Jones. How encouraging would it be to the rest of us if we got to hear about all the hard stuff that the leaders in our industry dealt with? And not only did that eventually lead to the creation of this panel that I just got to do at Scaling New Heights, but in some sense, Questian, like it really led to the creation of our podcast. It's all about like real talk and saying things out loud. We always say everyone's thinking, but no one's saying, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's really important, especially when you are earlier in your career and you are looking up to someone who is kind of in a place where you're like, hey, they got there. That's where I'm going, or that's where I want to
Yeah.
be going, to see that they have struggles too. And so, especially if you're in a position of leadership, being able to share your vulnerability helps other people recognize that the struggle that they are having is not different than the struggles that other people in those positions have,
Yes,
you
that's
know.
actually where Alnisha came into the story because we got a chance to talk about this because I had been at a session of hers at Bridging the Gap at the first one. And she, was telling us about all sorts of the changes that she had made in her firm. And then I was like, hey, what do you still struggle with though? Like, sounds all rosy and wonderful. Like, we were having these problems and now we made these changes and you can too. And I was like, great. But I feel like, of course, Alnisha can make these changes. Of course, she can. She's superwoman. She's amazing. And she was like, girl, no. And we were like, hey, if we all showed up like that all the time, where we saw both the struggles and the successes, that it would be really validating, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, that was the idea behind it.
Well, someone actually said to me the other day, um, a female colleague and friend of ours said to me, you just seem like you just have everything perfectly all together. And I mean, if
Did
I
you
would have had
burst out
water in my
laughing?
mouth, I would have spit it out. Yeah, of course I did. Because I'm like, I feel like I'm falling apart most of the time. And I was like, it's interesting that that's your perception because, I feel like the perception would be the opposite. And then I thought to myself, well, maybe I'm not being open enough about the struggles that take place. But to your point about someone sharing after the fact, that tends to be how I manage it, is like once I've
Hmm.
gotten through it, once I've processed it, because I feel like this is probably often with a lot of people. I feel like I'm putting the weight of my troubles or struggles or whatever it is on someone else by being
Hmm.
open and sharing it in the moment. And once I've moved through it and figured it out and gotten past it, then I tend to feel like, okay, now I can share it and that will help someone else. But it's really hard for me also to share kind of in that.
Yeah. I think that's a very human, that's a very natural, right? Like, it's not just you. That's a very natural way of being. And so, yeah, this panel we had three like superheroes. It was called Vulnerability is a Strength, Building a More Resilient Firm in an Uncertain World. And it was all about how it, it was Randy Crabtree and Tony Proctor and Brittany Brown. So like major leaders, real superheroes in the accounting world. And yeah, it was they were amazing. I'll be happy. I'm excited to share more about it for sure. Now you had a session that was
Yeah.
called Change Management, Internal Change and Client Change, right?
Yeah. So that was basically the topic. It was guiding clients and teams through transformation or something like
Uh-huh.
that. Honestly, don't remember exactly what it was called now.
Yeah.
Like
But
once
that's the
something is
basic idea.
passed, yeah, that's the basic idea. Yeah, and it
Well,
was
where'd the idea come from for that one?
so what I realized when I was having a conversation with Ashley Rhoden, who also happens to be my closest friend.
She was your
A lot of
co-presenter
She
on
was my
this session.
co-presenter
Okay.
on this session, yeah, and she and I were having a conversation about, I'm often managing clients through change because I'm niched in the nonprofit sector and
Mhm.
there are boards that are constantly turning over. It's, nonprofits are not owned. So the ED, the executive director, and the, director level staff are often changing over. And so the people who are the decision makers are changing a lot. And so one of the things that I do on a regular basis is I'm helping guide them through those changes and as being, being their partner through them. And my goal is always to be the person that they rely on. She's the COO of High Rock. And so she is constantly managing changes internally for the firm, whether it's technology or staffing changes or, whatever. Everyone knows what a COO does, right? So, but
Well, not everyone. Chief operations officer. Okay, so she's
yeah,
very, very operationsy,
yep.
fixing
And
workflows and
fixing workflows, that's
technology
right.
and yeah.
Yeah, trying
Okay.
to build efficiency. And so she's managing those teams through all of those changes. And so we thought, wouldn't it be amazing to have a session that kind of pulled in those two things? Because if you are running a firm, small or large, you're managing both of those. And in a way, my firm is smaller now, but in terms of people, but in a way, you have to do the same thing. Anybody who's running a firm does. And so it's like, if we can do both sides of this in one session, How amazing would that be?
Yeah, which I totally love. And I especially loved, again, when I was like, "Hey, how did yours go?" And you were like, "Hey, how did yours go?" And we were talking about it. I love the idea that leadership, whether that's leadership of a firm or like leadership with your clients and instilling confidence, um, it requires self-awareness, but it also requires the ability to understand what others are experiencing. And I felt like the overlap between your and Ashley's session and my panel, it really, I don't know, I just thought that was kind of like, oh wow, yeah, self-awareness and the ability to understand what others are experiencing. If you can take those two things and remember that those are like your grounding starting points kind of, then you can manage through change, whether it's internal, whether it's with clients, and of course set that example of empathetic leadership all at the same time.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And one thing, speaking of leadership, that I want to mention too is that, one of the things that is important to me and you, and part of the show, and something that we talk about is, putting more people in leadership spaces. And so I was very excited for her. And so I have to shout this out that she used to do, before she was at High Rock, a lot of work in M&A, and she got asked to join an M&A main stage panel and was the only woman on the stage talking about M&A. And this was also the first time that she had ever spoken at a conference. So talk about like being scared and doing it
Wow.
anyway.
And you
Yeah.
know what? Mergers and acquisitions is definitely something where you always think it's like the dudes, right? You think of that as being like a high-powered male executive. So that really is a huge accomplishment on her part. And I actually had not realized this was her first time speaking at a conference.
Yeah.
She really held her
Yeah.
own. She did an amazing
Yeah.
job.
She's done some webinars and things like that, but this was like the
Mhm.
first time at an actual conference. And
Wow. Go
I
Ashley. That's
know, and
really
she
cool.
brought the color to the stage, I have to say. So, it was really amazing to see. And so I just had to shout that out because,
Yeah.
one of the things that we're always pushing for is like, yeah, but put more women on stage. So
Yeah.
keep it upscaling.
They do a really good job with
Um,
that. I have been very impressed at the changes that have been made since, Heather Satterley came on board,
Heather's
for
done a
sure.
great job. Yeah.
She's amazing.
So we are, talking about vulnerability, talking about change, and so let's talk. Let's start with vulnerability because, as we know, accountants are famously comfortable with admitting they don't know something.
Very funny, right? We're practically known for it. Yeah, not so much. Well, the way that we started this, so this is the second time I've gotten to do this panel, vulnerability as a strength. And the first time was a couple years ago at Bridging the Gap. And lucky for me, Heather Satterley was actually in the audience there. So she had already seen what it could be. And so when we initially did it, it was Nio Carter Gray, Hector Garcia, and Don Brolin. Those were the original people who were in it. And then, as I said, this time I did Randy Crabtree and Tony Proctor and Brittany Brown. And in both cases, I started by sharing what I consider a deeply invasive survey with these folks, because the idea was to find out all the dirt, right? Like find out all of the stuff that nobody wants to say out loud, and then learn a little bit about how they cope with some of those struggles and spectacular failures, right? And then tease out the themes that are in their responses, things that like all three of them who are, widely viewed as highly successful, what were themes that came across in all of them. And it turned out that all of the themes are things that are helpful in both cognitive and dialectical behavioral therapy, which I know we talk about a lot on the podcast. So I'm going to give you the list because I want to bullet point this, because I think that each one of these could be its own episode. So the first one is reconciling perception versus reality, meaning the way that people see you versus what you are underneath, like you were saying earlier. Question. Number two is building resilience, which it turns out is one of the best ways that you can do that is get involved with communities and lean on other people and be there for them. There's finding balance between maintaining control and letting go, which I think is a really, really, really difficult thing for all of us. Finding meaning in the past and managing anxiety and stress. These are all methods of coping with emotional challenges that we've talked about on the podcast before. And like I said, community plays a really important role in making sure all of these are more likely to happen. And that really mitigates isolation. And so, yeah, we really leaned into all of that and discussed how leadership can increase pressure and isolation and self-doubt, and how that gap between how these successful leaders appear and what they're privately experiencing, like how wide that can be and how it can, can be lonely at the top.
Oh, yeah. One of the reasons that so for a long time when I had employees, I no longer do, which is the best decision I've ever made. But I was like, what do I do? And I was trying to figure out, I was like, I am not happy. What do I do?
Yeah.
Um, and I felt like lonely. And so the first thing was like, maybe I find a partner. Maybe so explored all these ideas because I just didn't like running a firm alone. And then I realized that I really like running a firm alone if the alone is just me.
Yeah. Yeah. But you still, it's not like you don't have community, right? Like
Oh,
community doesn't
absolutely
just
not.
mean
Yeah, with
having a
tons of
partner in your
community.
firm or having
Right.
employees.
Right.
But
But that to
yeah,
that point that it's lonely, like as a leader, like if you are running a firm and you're the leader of it, like there's a certain level of inability to you want to try as much as you can to connect to the people that are working with you, but at the same or
uh-huh.
working for you, but at the same time, they need to feel safe and confident in
Yeah. Yeah.
in the
So they
business
don't
and
want to know
everything
every
that's happening.
single one of your struggles because it can
And
make them
they're
feel like, oh
right.
my
And
gosh, they
if
don't know what
they
they're doing.
yeah, exactly. Or what's going to happen with my job,
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really
so
good point.
Nancy, what happens? Did you learn through this? What happens when leaders only share mistakes after they've been turned into a neat success story, which ties into what
Right.
I was saying earlier?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, again, I feel really I feel really privileged to have been able to do this same panel but with two different groups of panelists because they're everybody's story is different. Everybody's story is different. But one
Did
of
you
the
find
things
some commonality between both panels and the
absolutely.
panelists? Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so much. Like it's absolutely amazing. And one of them is like everybody has made a costly business decision. Everybody has made a major client error. Everybody has had a health crisis, whether that's physical health or mental health. Like it is amazing across all six people. Everybody has had this happen. And just knowing that these people who we hold up on a pedestal have made all the same mistakes and dealt with all the same challenges that every human being, especially people who are running their own firms, it's just, gosh, so much less isolating. Like you were just saying, lonely at the top, that leadership loneliness thing that Shirley Koss is always talking about. Um, it, it is very reassuring. And so, yeah, you see those commonalities. And when leaders only share mistakes after they've been turned into that neat success story, we don't get the opportunity to hear the real scale of another person's failure. We don't get to hear about how you learn from it before you're through it, how you develop hope for the future, why failure doesn't disqualify someone from leadership.
Well,
And
yeah, and it's like I think it's important you kind of hit on this, like how you get through it, right? Like
yeah,
those how you got through it is very different in hindsight than it is when you're
it,
actually in it.
in the middle,
Yeah.
yes, totally. I couldn't possibly agree more. I actually think that Nayo said it best in the first round of this when she said, "We don't let it define us," and Hector said, "We don't sit in it." And both of those, I don't know, for me, it goes back to that episode that we did called Do It Anyway.
Yeah.
right? Like, despite the fear of failure, despite the challenges that you're going through. I think it was a Hemingway quote that says, if you're going through hell, keep
Keep on
going.
going. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that
that's
was
familiar.
definitely one part of the the experience that I really loved. And then another one was how honest they all were about what they don't do well. Like, basically owning what you're not good at and not trying to pretend like you're good at things that you're not good at. You were just talking about how you don't want to make your employees feel like you don't have it under control, and you don't want to make them fear for their job. Like, you want to share with them. You don't want to share like all the things with them. One thing that I really would encourage you to share with them, based on what Randy and Tony and Brittany said, was they already know your team members, whether it's staff that you're supervising at a larger firm, or if you're the owner of a firm, the people that you
That's so
employ, or even the contractors that you're working with, right?
Mhm.
We think, oh, we've got to be infallible. We need to be like a leader, and being a leader means having it together. But it turns out it is extremely likely that they already have a pretty good sense of what we're not good at,
Oh, yeah. Probably the
right?
best bets. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, possibly a better sense than we do. And so
Yeah.
the idea here is, if you own what you're not good at, if you can be honest about, so like some of the answers that these panelists gave, Randy's really awful about conflict avoidance, like so much so that it really gets in the way sometimes. Um, Panelists talked about struggling with ADHD, which I know is something that you've talked about a lot.
Mhm.
Uh, Struggling with hiring and firing, and the desire to be loved, and how hard it is because you're like, oh, wow, people are not going to love me if I lay down the law. And so
Yeah.
keeping people accountable, like that's really, really, really hard to do. And so they talked about how they're not good at these things, and that this is one thing that you can be really open about. It's being vulnerable on the job with colleagues, and also in your firm, or wherever it is that you're working, if you're in corporate. That
So how can
it
a Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, how can a leader admit a weakness without making the team feel unsafe?
Right.
Like you
That is
said, they already
actually,
know it, but like how the team already knows it, but like how can they openly, and where is that line, which is kind of what we were talking about too. There's
yeah,
there's a line where you don't want your team or the people that work for you to fear for their job, but you want to be open with them
right.
and for them to still feel safe.
Well, I can't pretend that I have it all figured out, but what I learned from our panelists was definitely that um, pretending to be good at everything is going to backfire. Like, that's not going to make sense. Your team already knows that you're not good at some things. And so having self-awareness, like we were talking about earlier, trying to really recognize what things you're not good at and be honest with your team. And here's the big answer to your specific question: ask them to help. Say, you're really good at this. I'm not. Do you have ideas for me? Can we get you more involved in the vision for the future of the company? How can we have you take what you know and what you do and what you're good at and in your zone of genius, and help me make up for the areas where I'm not strong? And conversely, what you're saying there is, and how can I help you do the same? Right? And
Yeah.
so I think that that's a really nice way of saying, help me out. We're on a team together. It's not just mentorship in that direction, right? Like, it goes in both directions.
Yeah, you during your session, you did a word cloud, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it was so great. We actually started and ended with a word cloud, two
I
different
love a word
word
cloud.
clouds. Me too. Me too. And so it was wonderful. The opening word cloud, actually I was joking about it. That was one of the things that the evaluation said was so great about this session, was that we definitely, like, we talked about some really heavy things, but we peppered a lot of humor throughout, which made it kind of like easier to talk about the hard stuff.
Yeah.
And so when we started, the first word cloud was, how does it make you feel when you think you're the only one who doesn't have it together? And it was all like different versions of poopy, right? Like not awesome.
That's the word of the day, Nancy? Poopy?
Poopy. Totally. And then at the end, I will tell you, I took a picture of the word cloud because it was so beautiful and I started crying. There was a lot of Kleenex in the room because there was also a lot. We laughed, we cried. It was beautiful. And so the word cloud at the end was, how does it make you feel when you realize you are not the only one who struggles? And the
Yeah.
audience used words like seen, validated, not alone. I mean, like it was just amazing. Resilient was another one. And community, is basically this, it was the most essential part of many of those adapting coping strategies that we talk about on the podcast. So transparency, openness, well, we, obviously vulnerability, connection, and communications. It, we can build resilience together. We can be like that word cloud at the end where we all feel so validated. And, really like the opposite of isolated is in community.
Yeah.
But humans need to feel safe in order to do this. And when we recognize that we're part of a community,
Well, we're geared
it builds
towards that.
trust.
We are
Yeah,
geared towards building and creating community and social interaction. And so not being in isolation, and being vulnerable and creating that community,
it
that
builds
is
trust. It
very
builds trust.
builds trust, and it's very
Yeah.
natural part of who we are.
Yeah. And so that creates safe spaces where we recognize that we're not alone. I mean, I swear, Questian every week I hear about someone who is sure that they are the only one muddling through running their own firm. Every week.
It's like, no,
And
it is all 100% of us.
yeah, it
That's
is.
the survey. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
that
I'm pretty sure it's
that we all feel
100%.
that way. Yeah.
And so they'll
Yeah.
point to others who like have it all figured out and it's just not true. No one does. And so
No.
I feel like what we learned from these amazing panelists was that, if they don't have it together, it's okay that I don't have it together. And I think that if we can dispel this perception that there are people who do and people who don't, it presents a more balanced message of the reality of our world. And I swear it will have an effect on the profession as a whole. Like it will actually make it better.
Pick the most together firm owner that you think you know, right? Choose somebody and like
Picture
if
them
you
in
were
your
to, if
mind right now.
you're right, and if you were
Yeah.
like to ask them questions and to really dig in, I
Mhm.
guarantee that they're having the same struggles or have had the same struggles. And if you really peel the layers of the onion back, you will see
Yeah,
that this idea, this perception that we have in our mind of them is skewed, right? It's of them as a
absolutely.
person, of them with their firm, because there is no, I think so many of us look at people in roles that have like built these bigger or incredible firms or whatever it is and think, like you said, like they have it perfectly together. And what you find out is like if you've ever worked in one or been in one or owned one, what you recognize is that like it may look that way, but that's just not
Yeah.
how it is. And there
It's just
is
not how it is.
there's no perfect person, there's no perfect firm, there's no
Yeah.
ideal. There just isn't.
Yeah. And I truly believe that resilience grows through honesty and support and community. So when we can have these conversations out loud, like it changes it for everyone. It really helps us learn um if leaders can, what's the best way to say it? If leaders can model psychological safety, which is one of the concepts of empathetic leadership, by
Mhm.
asking questions and admitting mistakes and allowing other people to learn from their mistakes and
So,
asking
like,
for
behaving
help.
as a human?
Well, Well, yeah, but you know that dangerous word professional in quotes.
Oh, I
Like we
know.
feel like
Yeah.
it's not professional. And so I'm going to argue, I have said this in almost every single presentation that I've given in the past year, as AI takes on more technical work, empathy and connection, they become more valuable than they ever have before
Yeah.
in the history of our universe. They absolutely do. I mean, our it's what our clients want from us, it's what our team members want from us, it's what we want for ourselves. And all of that, it, as you said, like we're geared for it as humans. And so pull away some of those layers of the onion that you were talking about and allow yourself to share some of your own struggles and ask people about their struggles.
Yeah. I agree with you.
I mean, they're resilient firms aren't built by people who never struggle. That's the takeaway there, right? Like they're built by people who don't hide their struggles. And so to the point that Nayo had made, they're not defined by them. They're not sitting in it.
Yeah. So, it's really vulnerability is about recognizing and naming, what's happening inside of us, right? And
Mhm.
I think change leadership requires us to recognize what is likely happening inside of someone else, whether it be our client or our team member.
I
Um,
love that so much. That connection between self-awareness and awareness of what somebody else may be struggling with
I mean,
because
those are kind of the two things that are most, or maybe not I don't know, probably most important in a leader is that
yeah,
you have to have a self-awareness too. You can't just have an abundance of empathy for somebody else. You have to be aware of how your behavior and feelings and actions impact other people at the
yeah,
same time, right?
totally,
So,
totally. So all right, so your guys' whole session was on change management, whether it's with clients or inside the firm. And it's a different kind of leadership than the kind we were talking about, but equally it's a different type of empathetic leadership. So when a client organization, I know your whole thing is more the client side of things as
yeah.
opposed to
Yeah.
the internal side of things. When a client organization is changing, and here we're going to try to practice this concept of self-awareness being part of what's helping us recognize what is happening within other people. How do we know before they actually tell us?
One of the first things that I noticed is, and this could be with employees internally too, is like people start to build a distance. And that can look like longer response times, just if you're an internal employee, like not being as responsive, being off work more, whatever. I mean, that could mean a variety of things. But if it's a client, new people suddenly showing up in meetings,
You mean like a new
projects.
staff member or
Yeah, like
something? Yeah.
a new staff member or someone, I mean, it could be a team member, a consultant, it could be anything.
One of my favorites is when all of a sudden they ask you for a report. Can I get a report that shows XYZ,
And
PDQ,
you're
blah,
like,
blah, blah?
"Why?"
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're like,
Asking
"I
for
want a
what?
report that shows this." And if you ask what the report is for, 9 times out of 10, that's not really the report they need. It's a different one
Right.
to start with. But yeah, I know that we're all familiar with that. Yeah, unexpected reporting requests, just unusual kind of things, changes in who is making decisions. I think when change is happening and someone's trying to manage it, there's a struggle. And so it's like there can be just often less communication in general. I think that's the first thing that I
You
tend
mean
to
like if a
notice.
client goes quiet?
Yes, and that's what
Yeah.
happened to me
Yeah.
the first time I lost a client, which wasn't due to any of the work that we were providing, but one of the things that happened, oh gosh, was it a year and a half ago? I don't even know the time frame, but a lot of people are probably familiar with the fact that nonprofits lost a massive amount of funding.
Yeah.
And
It's been
so,
super hard.
yeah, and so, that's why, this change management for me went into overdrive at that time. But one of the things that I noticed in hindsight was that this particular client who was losing funding, and I knew it, and we were trying to like trying to figure out um, how to make up the difference and coming up
Mhm.
with, I always tell them you need to have multiple different revenue streams, but I'm
Right.
not the decision maker, and so they aren't always listening to it. But um, so one of the things that I noticed was that the response time started to get longer. And when I was asking for information so I could do the work, or when I was trying to like meet with them, that I recognize that they would like start to cancel meetings and that sort of thing. And
Mhm.
what
Mhm.
happened was eventually she like called me and told me, she just said, I've just got to like, we just cannot find the funding that we need. And so we've just got to tighten our belts um
Yeah.
and it just but those were the signs. Those were some of the first things that I happened to see. So and there can be a
So there are
variety of
times where you
reasons.
like I would no, I was just going to say that eh, sometimes the signs that you're seeing then are after the change was already underway, right? Like they're
Or
not
it's
really being
coming.
proactive about it.
Right. Yeah. And I wasn't in that scenario and they weren't either. And so one of the important things that needs to be done is pay attention to the signs. Like,
Right.
you know, make sure that a lot of people will do, it's like if they're doing financials for someone, like they'll send them an Loom video. I meet with my clients on a regular
Mhm.
basis
Mhm.
because meeting with them and asking them questions and being their partner and their trusted advisor is how I can continue to keep working with them, but it's also a method for growing scope with
Yeah,
clients.
that makes
So it's like,
sense.
a lot of people do that and that's fine.
Mm.
Like if that's what works for them. But in my firm, it's very relationship focused. And so
Mhm. Mhm.
those, when you have the opportunity, um, if you see the signs, then have more regular meetings, have conversations with them, ask open-ended questions,
Oh,
because
okay,
there's
give me some examples. I wanna know give me some examples of questions that can help a client open up about what's really happening.
I mean, I just have so one of the things that I think is important is like I just have a general rapport with most of my clients and
Mhm.
everybody has a different probably view on this, but it's like I ask them about their lives. So it's
Uh-huh.
like I start off the call kind of, just having a normal conversation like I would with any friend and then or colleague and then, you just ask them open-ended questions. What's new? What's changed? What are you planning for in the next few months. And so it's like once you just start asking those questions, things start to come up and then you can continue asking and that is how I have found it's like my questions to them are the method by which I get the most information. It's not them telling me something
Mhm.
like, hey, this is coming up and I want you to know about it. Or it could be something they see in the financials that prompts a question too. It's like, this is different. Like, I haven't seen this before. Who is this vendor? Like, what are you do? What are you doing? And so,
That totally reminds me at the second Reframe conference, that's Hector and Carlos Garcia's conference. I don't know
yeah.
if you've ever been to that one.
Oh, I haven't,
Um,
but it's on my list.
yeah, it's very cool. So,
Yeah.
at that, they were talking about the importance of leading with curiosity, and I think our inclination as accountants, I know it's my inclination. Even though I'm a naturally curious person, I also immediately want to propose a solution. I got to meet Erin Collins, the taxpayer advocate, um, the other day at NATP Taxposium. And she and I were talking about that because we were just talking about life together. And every time that I would mention something, she would be like, what about this? Have you done this? Have you done this? And I was like, no wonder you're so good at being a taxpayer advocate because like you're always looking for problems and, proposing a solution. But in this situation, leaving it open ended, like you're talking about, and leading with curiosity and kind of letting them come out with this as opposed to immediately providing a solution you're actually going to get. It actually is also something that Liz Farr talks about on her Disruptors podcast. I know she's got this whole theory from all of the disruptor interviews she's done. She's actually having a panel of us coming up speaking at Bridging the Gap on the things that she's
Oh,
learned from
amazing.
interviewing disruptors. Yeah, it's going to be so cool. It's going to be Terrell Turner and Nicole Davis and Randy and I are the four disruptors. And then
Ah, I
it's going to be
love
so
this.
good, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
Liz is
I'm
going
sorry
to
I'm gonna
ask
miss
us
this one.
questions that are going to be, around these four pillars that she's come up with, this idea that she has about what makes, what makes disruptors, basically. What are these quote unquote new ideas in leadership and accounting? And one of the things that she and I talked about on the first time that I was on her podcast was being the person that your client goes to first when they
Yes,
have
and
a problem with something. And that goes along with what you're
that's
saying,
right.
right?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the main, key the key, two key takeaways was become the trusted advisor for your client. So you're the first person that they talk to whenever
Mm-hmm.
they make any decision, and that change is an opportunity. Change is not, most accountants are scared of change, but change is an opportunity for us with our
Yeah.
clients. It's an
And you can be
opportunity
scared
to
of
be.
change and have it be an opportunity at the same time.
That's
That's
right.
probably worth mentioning.
Well,
Like,
and it's, the changes are our opportunity to, if you are running a firm and you is bookkeeping and accounting and you're not doing advisory, those changes, those are your into advisory, right? So it's like
mhm,
becoming that advisor, walking them through, helping them through those changes, whatever they are. And we all know that it is a lot more expensive to find a new client than it is to grow a current client
absolutely.
relationship. So those changes are, again, an opportunity to grow scope. And
Yeah,
so we shouldn't
yeah.
be, like you said, it's okay to be afraid of it, but do it anyway, right?
Do it anyway. Do it
Yeah,
anyway. She's
help
one of my
manage the
favorites.
change and do it anyway. Yeah.
Twyla Verhelst, who was one of our early guests, I got to see her a few weeks ago when she came to Chicago with Carbon to do an AI training for accountants. And she came up with a really cool way to do some of what you're talking about. She, to use AI specifically for doing it. And she
Hmm.
said to take, I don't know if this is something you already do, but she suggested taking the transcript of your most recent one or two or three client meetings before you have your next meeting with a client. Take those transcripts, run them through whatever AI tool you're using, and
Yeah.
say, what about these is something that I should consider bringing up or thinking about before the next meeting? And so it could be something as simple as, they were running late to the last meeting because their dog was sick. So this tells you they have a dog. And this tells you that they care about that dog because, they were at the vet and they were da 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 da.
Yeah,
So it could
which
just
goes back
be
to the thing that I was saying, which is like, I wish that people could do that piece naturally, but if it's not something that comes to you naturally,
right.
then it's a good,
Yes.
yeah, it's
Or
a good
even if it
reminder
does come
to
to you naturally, but you have enough clients that you don't
you
remember
can't
like all
remember.
of the details of every single one. Like, I don't remember whose dog got sick last time, that can be really hard.
Yeah.
So that was a really good suggestion. I liked that a lot. And then there were other things like, looking for opportunities to increase scope, like you were saying.
Yeah. Yeah, like
Yeah.
putting it in
So
there and asking it. Yeah, I mean, I think that's an incredible idea.
yeah.
Um, and there are so many other, we could have a whole episode on just ideas for that. Like,
Ooh,
don't get me
that's a
going.
really good. I'm writing that one down. All right,
Yeah.
cool. So how do you respond when leadership wants the change, but the people doing the work don't want the change? Because that, I
Well, I mean,
mean,
we have to find out what's their motivator. There's a motivation somewhere. Like they're scared of losing something, right? But then if they can understand, this is in more internal, and this is, um, from my experience, but also mostly Ashley's words, is if you can really, and it seems obvious, but I don't know that it is to everyone, is that if you just need to frame it in a way where they can understand that the reason that you're doing it is often because you're taking their feedback and you're trying to solve a problem for them. And the
Mhm.
problem could be something like a piece of technology, like we're implementing this piece of technology, we're standardizing, we're adding SOPs. And the reason that we're doing that is because we want you to be able to take a vacation and not take your laptop. So if you have your SOPs all outlined,
Yeah, but then
then you can go
question, that
on
means they're
vacation.
potentially losing control or authority or job security or identity, so it can be
Well,
really threatening.
I know. And I think that it's like helping people managing that, helping them see what the benefits are in multiple different ways and scenarios. And
Mhm.
but I think you're right, is that someone goes, oh, well, if you create those SOPs, then you can replace me. But the fact of the matter is, like, we're all replaceable, right? Like whether we
Yeah,
have the
I guess you
SOPs
could
or
look at
not.
it that way. Yeah.
But yeah.
Well,
And so
but
it's like
sometimes
just
it's hard though because the person who's implementing or approving the change is not the person who's carrying the burden. So, sometimes they're just like, well, that doesn't match the concerns that I'm having. And so in that kind of case, you got to explore that pushback
what's an
because
example?
well, so let's say you think that this particular technology is going to help me be able to do something. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
that's not my problem. You're solving for a different problem. My biggest pain point is this thing over here. And that happens.
Yeah.
It happens, I would argue, more at bigger companies because the people who are making those decisions are sometimes several layers removed from
Oh yeah.
the
I mean,
people who are actually,
yeah. Well, I think that a big piece of it is, and you're never going to make everyone happy. That's impossible. But
that's
when you're
true.
going through this change management process, like you get buy-in early. So you're talking to them, you're asking them to help you make a decision about what the technology is. And so it's not, and maybe and I mean, if it's a much larger firm, maybe you're pulling employees from a pool, right? So you're not going
Right.
to be able to get the feedback from every single person, but you're going to be able to get feedback from some of them. And so getting that buy-in early is extremely important because they you cannot, if you don't have buy-in from your team, it's going to fail.
Yeah.
It's going to fail. And so
Well, to
getting
go back to the point that you were making about being able to recognize the change in other people without them actually saying it overtly, if you can think about the why behind it,
That's right.
um, like what are people afraid of losing? What is the threat to them? What
I mean, I think there's a number, but it's like, what if it's a piece of technology, maybe it is they're afraid of like losing being the expert in that area.
Mhm.
So, you offer to help them become the expert in some other area or
Yeah.
whatever tool it is that you're developing. People are scared of feeling like they don't have control. So, I think that there's a lot of different reasons people feel that way. And, getting people through the transition period, that's the hard part. Like everyone, it's like the decision to make the change is nowhere no is much less difficult than getting, it's like three parts, right? So it's the end of like the old process and letting that go, and then you get into the messy middle, and then you
Mhm.
go into the new beginning with whatever the change was like being complete and taking place. And when you are in the messy middle, that's where the most of these transit like that's the biggest transition, and that's where most of these changes that we're
Mhm.
going through, where we lose people and where we fail. And so helping people emotionally get through that.
Yeah, because just because something is going to launch on a certain date doesn't mean you're like you can't just emotionally transition on command. Like, okay, now we're all happy
Yeah,
about this now. Yeah, that definitely makes sense that it takes time to get
yeah,
from like just because you're completing the project doesn't necessarily mean the change succeeded, which I'm sure you've probably seen plenty of times.
oh yeah, 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 of course, the project or a client shift or change. Yeah. And those changes are, I had um I'll be honest, like I've had a project that I was working on recently, and the team that I was working with was my client's team, and like there was one person that every time I knew, there's always the one person every time I turned the corner and was trying to help solve a problem or make a change, and they're big changes, right? It
Yeah.
was like I was met with resistance every single time. And so I just had to keep working to show the benefit over and over and over. And like as we started coming through to the other side, we could see what the change was going to actually be and look like. That's when it felt like, okay, we finally got the buy-in.
Right, right. Totally.
So
That totally makes
yeah.
sense. So you mentioned earlier talking about how having these open-ended questions with clients and trying to not just have the self-awareness, but the awareness about what's going on internally with other people. You mentioned that sometimes that gives you an opportunity to expand your scope. So
Yeah.
I have a very specific question about that. How do you know when something has become a different engagement rather than just a temporary adjustment? Like, how do you actually, when the client changes, when their needs change, the engagement has to change too. How do you know when that happens?
You're like, how, I mean, you have to kind of, when you see that something is changing, name it out loud, right? To
Hmm.
them, to yourself, like, okay, this is what it is. I think we need to look at our scope. Like, do we know what our original scope is? I mean,
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
a
know
really good
about you,
point.
but none of mine are consistent. Like, all of my clients have a different scope of work. So,
So
I
you
may not
go back to
remember.
the original, like, engagement that they signed and what it
That's
says
right.
on it? Okay.
And hopefully it's very detailed.
Not mine, and they should be,
And
but they're
then look
not.
at what, if what is the new outcome that they're looking for,
Okay.
and define that. And so looking at the current scope, defining what the new change or outcome is. There are things like, I mean, when you're having these conversations with clients, that they may say to you, like, one of the ones that came up to me a lot, that would happen to me a lot. And this, it's like, is when my clients were losing funding, I transitioned several of them. I lost several of them, transitioned into actually like higher paying clients because we were going through and having to figure out, and we were having one-off projects to figure out, like, how can I cut costs, right?
Uh-huh.
And so it's like
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily expand scope, but if I am permanently, like monthly, but if I am helping them determine, for example, and this was actually one of the most difficult things, like, do I need a workforce reduction?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
helping, if that's not part of my scope, I need to charge for it. It doesn't matter what the situation is. Like, that's taking my time.
Well,
So
how do you do that? You increase the scope, change the scope and the pricing without sounding opportunistic. I mean, it sounds kind of vulture-y, right? Like, even though I know you're trying to help them, I always
yeah.
struggle with that.
Well, I think it's again like naming what's changed and letting realizing that the new outcomes are different from what was originally scoped, and the engagement needs to actually support where the organization is today. And
Yeah. Yeah, that
those
makes
aren't
sense.
always good places. Like, we hope that scope is changing because our clients are earning more revenue and they're growing, but that's probably very often not the case. So
Yeah. So sometimes
um
the scope's changing for supporting
negative reason.
a negative, yeah, where
Yeah.
the organization is today.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
So um
Yeah. I mean, I
you
guess
know
if the conversation's centered on the client's needs and you're being transparent about it, like,
yeah, and
it
avoiding surprises. And that's what it is. It's like the conversations usually come about, and you're talking about what it is that they need, and they don't expect you to do it for free. When
yeah.
you
Yeah.
explain to them, like, this is the scope, this is the new outcome, and so we need to change the engagement because it is different than it was, like, that's expected. So
Yeah.
um but when you're doing it, do it with sensitivity, especially if it's a negative situation.
Yeah, otherwise you're
Um,
just taking advantage of chaos, and that's
yeah, and it's
not
like
what
that's
we
really
want.
not what it is. It's like we want to help our clients, but at the end of the day, I have a family and I need to feed them and they need to eat. And
Mhm.
if I am spending time doing that work for you, it's work that I can't be spending or that I can't be doing for somebody else. So,
Right. Yeah, no,
and
that's
part
just
of
responding and adapting to the client's actual needs. It's being the trusted advisor because you're being proactive and responsive to what their actual needs are and not what your original scope was.
yeah, and if you continue to work, I've experienced this too. If you continue to do work for clients that is outdated, or no, I'm sorry, that the scope is outdated on, and you're doing extra work and you're not billing for it, it can build resentment and,
Mhm.
create frustration and it weakens the relationship. So it's,
I've
you
definitely
know,
been there. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah,
I know what you're talking
same.
about. That's
Same. The
yeah,
stuff that we're talking about doesn't come like we don't it comes from like all
from
the number
experience,
of
lived
experiences
experience.
that yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that we've had. So, our job is it's not just to implement like technical changes, but it's to help implement a technical change or a workforce change or a whatever it is. It's to help people move through what the changes are and to be a
Yeah.
trusted advisor for them. At least that's how I look at my role, and
I
like
love
everybody
that.
is in a different place with the type of services that they're offering. But
Man, I wish I had had the opportunity to be in your and Ashley's session. That just sounds absolutely amazing. It sounds
I
like
know, I'm sorry I
yeah.
missed yours too. I had gone home by the time it happened.
Yeah. Oh, well, ours was on the last it was the last session on the last day. But it's okay. I'm going to sum it up for you. I'm going to sum it up for you. Question, no one has everything figured out. Number 2, vulnerability does not weaken leadership if it's paired with responsibility and self-awareness. And number 3, and I know you know this so well, resilience is built through community. See, you didn't have to come. I just gave it all to you right there.
You got the bullet points. Yeah.
Give
I
me
think
yours. I want your bullet points.
mine is that change is an opportunity.
Mhm.
So I think it's like um, relationships and scopes evolve when organizations evolve, and that is an opportunity, and that's how we should look at it.
Yeah, I love it.
So, Nancy, what is one question that you would like the listeners to ask themselves about vulnerability?
I'm glad you said that because this is something that we talked about in the panel itself. It was my ask of the audience, the in-person audience at our session. And the question to ask is who out there in the world actually knows what you are carrying right now? Who out there knows it? And write this down. Like write down the list of people who know the heaviness of the weight that you're carrying because that's going to tell you because if you can't write anybody down, right? You're not letting others in. And then
Yeah.
you write down all of the people who do know it. That is going to answer your question about are you letting others in? But I want everybody to do the converse of that too. Whose load can you help lighten? Not just have the self awareness about what you're carrying and who you're letting in, but looking externally and thinking about who out there might be struggling that you could be supporting. And that is something I dearly, dearly hope that all of our listeners will take a serious few moments to sit with that and think about it. Are you letting others in? And are you reaching out to others?
Yeah, that's something that I know I will certainly be thinking about. I try. Sometimes it's hard to like take a pause when you're speeding through life and to ask yourself both
Yeah.
of those questions, but it's giving me some food for thought.
Maybe it's something that we can each do when we're writing our to-do list before going to bed, like Valerie Heckman taught us. This
Yeah.
can be something that we add to it. Whose load can I help lighten and who knows what I'm going through?
Yeah.
Well, as we
Good
wrap
question.
up, we'd love to ask listeners to follow our She Counts podcast LinkedIn page and to join in on this conversation by sharing under the episode Two Sides of Leadership. Which side of leadership needs more attention from you right now? Being more honest about what you are carrying or becoming more curious about what someone else is carrying?
And before we sign off, we want to leave you with a quote by one of our favorites, Nicole Davis, that was highlighted in Nancy's session. Vulnerability is a strength that the greatest leaders wear with pride.
Yeah, that was part of her keynote at Scaling New Heights a few years ago. So I definitely wanted to include it on a slide in our session.
Yeah, she has her Nicoleisms are the best. Her quotes are amazing.
Nicoleisms.
Thanks for being here with us on She Counts, the Real Talk podcast for women in accounting.
If something in today's episode hit home for you, well, that is exactly why we're doing this.
So you feel seen, heard, and never alone.
Remember that you can get CPE credit for listening at earmark.app. Links to that, as well as how to learn more about our sponsors' solutions and any of the other resources we talked about today, will be in the show notes.
And please subscribe and leave us a review because it helps other people find the podcast. Also, please share with another woman in accounting who needs to hear it too.
And we'll see everyone in 2 weeks. Take care.